It doesn't need to take 3 months to get SEO results. Here's how. All right. So this video is in response to a tweet that I made earlier today, kind of forcing myself into making this video. And I said that getting results doesn't need to take forever, which I'm going to back up and explain step by step what we did to get this new domain up to 100 clicks per month, which, isn't a whole lot, obviously. But for a new domain, that is certainly not bad. And as you can see with the impressions here, it's 8,000 impressions. As we make the content better and as the position over time goes up, we'll obviously convert much more of that to clicks. That will just take some more time. All right, here's some more stats. So it's about this domain, very new. You can see 35 backlinks all in the last month, 3 domain rating, which is usually just a matter of backlinks. So it just expresses how many backlinks and how good the quality of the backlinks is in one number, which makes it easy to compare sites. We have one other asset that has a 50 DR, which is quite okay. 3 is certainly bad if you've never heard about DR. And that is mostly because we don't have any backlinks, right? So you can see here, 395 keywords, 18 organic traffic. This is just an estimate. We're getting more, but these tools are always somewhat off with their estimates, especially when it comes to small numbers. Even Google Search Console is quite inaccurate at small numbers. But you can see here, August 23rd, 5 clicks in 28 days, and September 25th, 100 clicks in 28 days. This is from Google Search Console. It will give you these kind of milestone notifications. And I'm going to show you now how we approached it. Number one, obviously, is keyword research. So the goal for keyword research, and quick disclaimer here, I use SwiftBrief for everything, which is our own tool. You can use other tools, SEO tools. There are a lot, and you can combine them however you want. But we've built SwiftBrief because it has everything we need in order to publish high quality content very quickly. And so we're kind of dogfooding our own product while building out these assets. And we're also, trying to get traffic, obviously. So keyword research, the goal of keyword research, you want to find keywords that are worth going after because they balance traffic potential with competitiveness, right? So a lot of times you'll hear people talk about volume keywords with low keyword difficulty. That's essentially what that is. But with SwiftBrief, we're taking it one step further because we're also looking not just at, we're also giving you stats for the average DR. So what's the average domain strength here on the top 10 for this keyword? And we're giving you an authority mark, which is the lowest DR on the top 10. So this is kind of your entry point. This will be very, very important if you have a very competitive space, just because it's very hard as a 3DR to compete with a 40 or with a 3DR to compete with an 80, which is like in more competitive spaces, you'll probably see something around 80. For example, in the wedding speech tool that we have, the wedding related keywords like wedding planning or something, they'll be 70 to 80 average, and then like a 70 authority mark, which is a 70 lowest on the top 10, which means as a 50, even though we have a 50, it's still not very likely for us to all rank well there unless we have a lot of authority, right? So it's not a one size fits all answer, but it gets us very close. And what we're also seeing is like, okay, the lowest on the top 10, how much traffic are actually getting? Because a lot of times you'll have low entry points, but they're also not getting any traffic, right? So this is a sign, okay, we don't necessarily want this because it means most likely that the most clicks go to the top 3 or the top 4. Maybe there's a featured snippet in there that's getting a lot of clicks. So essentially that one doesn't actually get any of the traffic, which is not that great. So here to evaluate this, looking at the numbers, I think, for example, that this one doesn't look that bad, even though it has a 52 average. It's a 20 for entry and it gets 124 traffic. So that isn't a bad one. Actually, this one turned out, if we're looking at our data later, turned out to be quite a good one. Eulogy examples, which I didn't expect. I think it's probably our best keyword, which we can check by looking here. So funny eulogy generator got 5 clicks and it's all like funny eulogy examples. So it's very, very niche, but that means it's usually not very competitive, which I think, that's the wrong one, which I think you can also see in the data here, right? But again, like these are estimates and you should always take any kind of data with a grain of salt, but it should give you certain pointers on what to go after. And we didn't necessarily pay a lot of attention here to these because we already knew which clusters to go after or which keywords to go after, because we're technically copying the exact formula from another asset. But if you were to start from zero, that's the first step you do. So you do some keyword research, right? Next step is keyword clustering. So this is essentially finding the actual page keywords. There's usually a primary keyword that is the kind of target keyword, and then there's secondary keywords, and then cluster them together to not have what's called cannibalization. So you don't want to have two pages competing for the same keywords. And like a keyword clustering tool will help you figure out which keywords belong on the same page, right? So for example, I don't necessarily want a eulogy examples page. So SwiftBrief does this for you, where all of these are already clustered for you. So if you go in here, it will give you similar keywords to that it thinks they should go on the same page. And then when you create the brief and you create the content, it will also put them on the page for you according to certain frequencies, right? But for example, I don't want to have a page that tries to rank for eulogy examples, and then I don't want to have another page that ranks for example eulogies or examples of eulogies or speech examples, because those are essentially the same thing expressed in different ways, either different order of words or similar concepts, but use different words. So those should essentially live on the same page. They shouldn't be different pages. And clustering helps with that. All right, then we're getting to producing high quality content, which is obviously given. What you want to focus on, because that's kind of, everybody tells you to do that. It's you want to have depth. So you want to have the article be very detailed, especially if it's a guide. So what we did, we went in and we created one guide for each persona that we're trying to target for. Eulogy examples is a kind of catch-all that groups all personas. But if we were to go for, I don't know, a wife eulogy or something, then we have like wife eulogy. That will be a guide that explains how to write a eulogy for a person that is your wife. And then there will be wife eulogy examples. And there will be a solutions page, which is essentially the tool where you can create that eulogy, that is what we monetize. And I have a separate video on this, how to go about it and how to pick these clusters and how to build them out. So I'll link that up here somewhere. All right, then you want internal linking. So if they are in the same cluster, let's say the same persona or the same context, you want to make sure to link between them, which I'll show you here. So this is one of the guides. As you can see, images, internal links. So here is the eulogy generator that is for this guide, and the eulogy examples. They're always linked up every section. Essentially, you want to do and kind of play around with what converts well, because essentially what you're trying to do is you're trying to push people down the funnel from informational content to examples or straight up to the tool where they can write a speech or eulogy in this case. You want images just to break up the content, make it look better. And you want to make sure you cover the keywords. So the page keywords and the keyword cluster that is for that page, they should be significantly covered. You will have tools that give you recommendations. So they say this page keyword, it should go on the page 8 to 10 times or whatever. You can use tools like that. Or again, SwiftBrief already has that built into the process. So it already decides for you based off of what we can see that is performing. We determine a frequency for the keyword, and you can just assume that the brief will contain it, plus the content will contain it. And it won't stuff it anywhere. It will still make it like natural. So in case it won't be able to fit it everywhere, then you might have one or two times of the keyword, but essentially that is more of a further optimization. So if you see that whatever you have right now is not performing, that could be one angle to just optimize it more for a certain keyword, but that should give you like a good baseline. All the content here is created with SwiftBrief and is manually edited and tweaked here and there for sake of making sure that everything is good. And that is usually the job of an editor, or you can obviously do it yourself if you don't have one. You can also write the content yourself, obviously. And a lot of times it will be necessary if you're in some sort of niche where it's very important that everything is super accurate. Then I wouldn't use AI tools necessarily, but I would make sure the content is accurate. However, you can use AI to draft something if you want. Another thing, external links, we always include it because that's just a measure of, adding further authority and adding more. So if the user wants to branch out into one very specific area and you don't cover that, but there's value added if you can, then yeah, just a link there as well. And then we also went in and we created infographics. So for each of these blog posts, we have an infographic examples, right? So this is more or less an infographic, and we have two reasons for that. So one is essentially we post those to Pinterest as well, which is very interesting for image content, and that gives us links from Pinterest. They're not super strong, but it's just social signals. And it also just gives us another, more depth to the content. It will let us in the alt text, we can embed the keyword normally. So we have the keyword in the alt text. And it just, again, breaks up the content, and it's usually worth it because if anyone shares anything out of this, it certainly is not going to be the images, but they might share this, or they might share like a more guide picture, a checklist or something like that, right? So think about what your content is and then how you can add value by adding a visual representation of what you're covering, and then add that to the content. All right. And then we created so-called pillar pages. So these are just pages that cover everything in a certain cluster. So for example, here we have husband eulogy, which is the cluster. And in that cluster, we have 3 pages. This might grow over time, but for now we have a guide on how to write a eulogy. We have examples, and we have the generator, which is again the tool. And we also, which is here, and we also have images, which are all the infographics from all the blog posts here. And this just gives the user a guide, like one place to find everything if they're looking to inform themselves about the process of writing a eulogy, and gives us a way to have more internal links to these blog posts that live not so far away from the root or from the homepage. So this is the homepage. And then those guides, they are linked down here. So that gives a very easy way for Google to crawl, because the crawl depth isn't so big as to going through the blog. And maybe on the blog, we have other pages, right? So here needs to go through and then find the blog posts. And they're also not nicely prepared for the user. So whatever you can do to make it easier for the user to kind of navigate your site and find the thing that they're looking for, the easier you also make it for Google, right? Because Google is essentially mimicking a user and checking the user experience. All right, and then here's some optional ones. So obviously, as you saw, and as I mentioned earlier, this is a niche site, right? So it's not essentially necessary that you are in a niche site. You can make this work wherever, but obviously quick results are most likely not going to happen overnight in like SaaS, in the SEO tool space, for example. So we have this tool SwiftBrief that we're also obviously growing with content, and it's much, much, much harder to see results. I think we've been doing it for 2 to 3 months now, or even more, and I think we get like 500 clicks a month or something, and it's just a lot more uphill battle. So if you are new and your project is new, then I think it makes sense if you want to first like learn SEO, or if you want to really rely on SEO, it makes sense to try to find something that's not competitive in general, just because it makes it so much easier. And if you don't have the choice, it's again boils down to keyword research. So finding something that strikes a good balance between where you're at in terms of authority and what you can get, in terms of traffic, and trying to go after long tail keywords first, build up some authority in a topic, let Google know that you are good at covering a certain topic, and then moving on to the next one. But definitely keeping in mind competition as the first metric to filter out what you should go after or not, and then volume, and then obviously relevancy. So you might not be able to get traction with the direct keyword, that you want to go after that has the most value for your business, but you need to start somewhere, and you need to start building authority, and you need to start getting traffic onto your page to show Google that your content is good by working on metrics like time on page. So how long are people on your page? Are they clicking through? Are they engaging with your site? That all gives Google obviously signals to help you that will essentially help you rank other things faster as well. And also, obviously, you can always try to convert people from less relevant pages as well. So that becomes your main thing to worry about, essentially, competition. In the end, it's just basic market forces here, right? So it's essentially supply and demand, and a niche just has so much less supply, and demand can still be there, but it's just no one is like willing to produce content. Maybe they haven't found a way to monetize it, or maybe it's just not worth it. And that's essentially, finding these opportunities and going after them is a lot of the work that you need to do. Another thing is an exact match domain. That's also optional. If you can get it, why not? So for this one, we have eulogygenerator.com. We also have funeralspeechgenerator.com, I think. And that is just redirecting. But yeah, that was a good find that was still around. And I think that's all. Actually, I put this down, which is do the goddamn work, which is always a good idea, because without the work, you will not see, what to double down on. You will not have any idea what works and what doesn't. And I think that this is where the results are, and it's not necessarily like none of the stuff that I told you today is any different than any advice that's out there. It's all just a matter of, trying, failing, experimenting, going again, and knowing that there's no real silver bullets and there's no real shortcuts to any of this. It's just work, and it's a lot of waiting, and that's it. All right. Let me know if any of that stuff sounds interesting to you. You can always subscribe below, because I think 80% of the people that watch this channel are not subscribed. So I'd appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers. Jesus.